You wake up on a Monday morning. The alarm rings. You hit snooze once, maybe twice. Eventually, you get up, make some coffee, and start getting ready for work. It's not a terrible job. It pays the bills. Your coworkers are fine. Your boss isn't unbearable. But somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this quiet thought. Is this really it? You've had ideas before. Maybe starting something of your own. Maybe learning a new skill. Maybe investing more seriously instead of letting money sit in the bank. But every time that thought appears, another voice shows up. What if it doesn't work? What if I lose money? What if things get worse? So you stay where you are because it feels safer. And on the surface, that decision seems responsible, logical even. But here's the uncomfortable question most people never ask. What if the safe option is actually the most expensive one? Most of us grow up with the same financial story. Stability is good. Risk is dangerous. Get a stable job. Keep steady income. Don't gamble with your future. And to be fair, that advice comes from a good place. For generations, stability really did mean survival. Your parents or grandparents might have lived through times when losing a job could mean losing everything. So naturally, comfort became the goal. But the modern economy has quietly changed the rules, and what many people still call safe is often just familiar. There's a subtle difference between those two things. Familiar feels predictable. You know what tomorrow will look like. Your paycheck arrives at the same time each month. Your life runs on routine. Safe, on the other hand, means your future is actually protected. Those two things are not always the same. Sometimes the thing that feels stable today slowly erodes your opportunities tomorrow. And the strange part is, it rarely feels like a mistake while it's happening. It just feels comfortable. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called loss aversion. In simple terms, the pain of losing something feels about twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining something. Losing $100 hurts more than gaining $100 feels good. Our brains are wired to avoid that pain. So when we think about changing jobs, starting a project, investing money, or even negotiating our salary, the brain focuses on what we might lose: income, security, reputation, time. And that fear quietly pushes us toward the safest-looking option. But here's the hidden problem. When we avoid small risks today, we often accept much larger risks in the long run. The risk of stagnation, the risk of missed opportunities, the risk of inflation quietly eating away at our savings. And because those risks unfold slowly, they rarely trigger the same emotional alarm. It's like a leak in the ceiling that drips once every few hours. Not dramatic enough to panic about, but over time, it still damages the house. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people in their mid-20s. Both earned roughly the same salary, both live similar lifestyles. The first person prioritizes stability above everything else. They keep their savings in a regular bank account because investing feels uncertain. The market moves up and down, and that volatility feels uncomfortable. So the money sits there, safe, predictable. But inflation exists, and over 10 years, the purchasing power of that money slowly shrinks. Nothing dramatic happens, no big crash, no obvious mistake, just quiet erosion. Meanwhile, the second person makes a different choice. Not reckless, just calculated. They accept that markets fluctuate. They understand there will be uncomfortable moments, but they also understand that long-term growth usually requires some exposure to risk. So they invest gradually, consistently. Some years feel great, some years feel terrible. But over time, the math starts working in their favor. The difference between these two paths rarely shows up in the first year, sometimes not even in the fifth. But by year 10 or 15, the gap can be enormous. And it didn't come from dramatic decisions. It came from small choices about comfort. The comfort trap doesn't only appear in investing. It shows up in careers, too. Think about how many people stay in the same role for years, even when they've stopped growing. Not because they're lazy, but because change introduces uncertainty. A new job means a new environment, new expectations, new people. Even if the opportunity is better, the unknown feels threatening. So people stay. And again, it feels reasonable. But over long periods of time, staying too comfortable can become surprisingly expensive. Your salary grows slower than the market. Your skills stop evolving as quickly. And suddenly 5 years pass, then 10. One day you look around and realize the industry moved forward without you. Not because you made a bad decision in a single moment, but because comfort quietly stacked small decisions in the same direction. And here's the interesting part. The people who escape this trap aren't necessarily fearless. They don't wake up every day excited to take risks. In fact, most of them feel the same anxiety everyone else does. The difference is how they interpret that feeling. Instead of asking, "What if this fails?" they also ask another question. What happens if I never try? That second question changes everything, because it forces you to measure a different kind of cost, the cost of staying exactly where you are. And when you start looking at life through that lens, something shifts. You begin realizing that stability isn't about avoiding movement, it's about building options. There's a quiet turning point that many financially calm people eventually reach. They stop chasing comfort and start chasing flexibility. Comfort feels good today. Flexibility protects tomorrow. Flexibility means having skills that remain valuable. Flexibility means having savings that buy you time. Flexibility means understanding how money grows instead of letting it sit idle. And interestingly, flexibility almost always requires small moments of discomfort. Learning something new feels awkward at first. Investing feels uncertain at the beginning. Negotiating a raise can feel incredibly uncomfortable. But those temporary discomforts often create long-term stability. In other words, a little strategic discomfort today can buy a lot of peace later. Now, this doesn't mean quitting your job tomorrow or taking reckless financial bets. That's not the point. Calculated action is very different from blind risk. Most meaningful progress actually comes from very boring, repeatable decisions. Saving a portion of your income consistently, gradually investing over time instead of waiting for the perfect moment, improving your skills even when your current job feels good enough. None of these actions are dramatic, but they slowly shift your relationship with comfort. Instead of asking, "What keeps me safest right now?" you start asking, "What keeps my future strongest?" And that subtle shift compounds just like money does. One of the most practical ways to escape the comfort trap is surprisingly simple. Create a personal safety net that makes experimentation less scary. For many people, this starts with something like an emergency fund, not because emergencies are guaranteed, but because the existence of that cushion changes your psychology. When you know you have several months of expenses saved, opportunities start looking different. A career move feels less dangerous. Learning a new skill feels less risky. Even investing becomes less stressful because you're not relying on that money for tomorrow's groceries. The safety net doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it makes growth psychologically possible. Another powerful shift is redefining what risk actually means. Most people think risk means losing money, but in the real world, risk also means losing time. If you stay in a stagnant situation for 10 years, the financial cost of that lost growth can be far larger than a temporary setback. Time compounds everything. Skills compound, relationships compound, money compounds. So when you think about comfort, it's worth asking a deeper question. Is this stability Or is this just delayed uncertainty? Because eventually, almost every system changes. Industries evolve, technology shifts, economies move. The people who adapt slowly tend to suffer those changes the most, not because they were irresponsible, but because they were too comfortable for too long. The goal isn't to eliminate comfort from your life. Everyone deserves some sense of security. But the real challenge is learning to recognize when comfort quietly turns into limitation, when the routine that once protected you starts holding you back. And that moment doesn't require a dramatic response. Sometimes it just requires curiosity, learning something new after work, exploring ideas you once ignored, putting small amounts of money into long-term investments, having honest conversations about your career direction. Tiny actions repeated consistently. They may not feel like breakthroughs, but they slowly open doors that comfort alone never would. Because the truth is, stability isn't something you find, it's something you build. And the strange paradox of financial life is that the most stable people often spent years doing slightly uncomfortable things, learning, adapting, trying, adjusting, not recklessly, just intentionally. So if you ever find yourself in that quiet moment on a Monday morning, wondering whether life is supposed to feel a little bigger than this routine, you're not alone. That feeling doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It usually means part of you recognizes potential that comfort has been quietly covering up. And you don't have to solve everything overnight. You don't need dramatic changes or risky leaps. Sometimes the most powerful step is simply noticing the trap, recognizing that safety and familiarity aren't always the same thing. From there, progress can be slow. Small decisions, thoughtful adjustments, a few uncomfortable moments along the way. And over time, those tiny shifts start adding up. Because in the long run, financial peace rarely comes from perfect decisions. It comes from consistent awareness and the quiet understanding that stability isn't about avoiding risk entirely. It's about choosing the right risks at the right time while you still have the freedom to try.